public. Yes, we are doing this live. I have no idea if anyone's going to watch this, but we're doing it. We're doing it live. Doing it live. Doing it live. Doing it live. Okay. I have no idea if anyone's going to see this as I am broadcasting it, but I do not care. This is my, what I guess is going to become a weekly, like a midweek question and answer video. I got some questions during the week since my last live stream on Sunday. So if you missed it, I will put a link to that video. If you're on Facebook, I'll write it in a comment. If you're watching on YouTube, for some reason, it's on the channel. But I want to just have these kind of one-off things during the week where I can answer some questions that I get from y'all. And I'm hoping to get to the point where I can just kind of hop on and do this and it's not a big production. Anyways, I have 2 questions that I'm going to answer. And I'm going to do it, hopefully, in 10 minutes. Under 10 minutes. Not 10 minutes from now. My hope is that these don't turn into like a long drawn-out thing. I just want to keep myself focused mostly. So I'm going to set a timer. 10 minutes. Timer for 10 minutes. Here we go. All right. 2 questions. Grab my notes here. Number 1, what is the deal with hospitality with regards to Abraham, Lot, and Rahab in 1st Clement? So this question is from Adam. This is an awesome question. So if you haven't actually read through 1st Clement, it's cool. I'm going to explain it real quick. So what Adam is asking about is these different moral examples that Clement uses to make his argument. So Clement is constructing this argument using moral examples. If you read through it, it sounds really familiar if you've read Hebrews. Hebrews does the same sort of thing rhetorically. This is sometimes called epidectic rhetoric. This sort of thing goes back to Aristotle, and it basically involves using positive and negative examples to persuade your reader or your listener to pursue a particular course of action. So praising or blaming different figures from the past in order to persuade your reader to do something. So Clement does this with a whole bunch of different figures. Moses, Abraham, Lot, Rahab, David, Jesus, of course. He uses all different kinds of folks to make his argument. He uses them as examples. What Adam is noticing is that with these 3 figures, Clement brings up hospitality specifically. And if I'm remembering correctly, I read through the relevant sections a few minutes ago. He doesn't really do this with anyone else. He doesn't bring up hospitality with reference to David or Moses, I don't think. But why hospitality, first of all? And it has to do with his rhetorical aim. His goal in writing this epistle to the church in Corinth was to help them resolve this division. And so this rhetorical aim involves humility. He's trying to persuade the folks who are causing division to either humbly submit to the elders and to Clement as well in some way, and we'll talk more about that in our next session on Sunday, to submit or to do the right thing and leave the church. And both of those things are going to involve humility. And so he's really emphasizing humble obedience. So he's making this very tight connection between humility and faithful obedience. So all 3 of these stories, Abraham, Lot, and Rahab, involve the intersection of hospitality and obedience to God's plan, particularly as it relates to God's plan to rescue Israel or rescue the people of promise as it relates to Abraham and Lot. So three things are relevant. So with the story of Abraham, he hosts the three strangers. It says in Genesis that God appeared to him, or God came to him, perhaps, and he sees three strangers. So in some way, God is representing himself as one of these three strangers. Some folks connect that to the Trinity, but that is the connection between Abraham and hospitality, is his taking in of these three strangers, and they sort of confirm during their time with Abraham, they're eating a meal together, they confirm the promise about Sarah's coming pregnancy with Isaac. Lot, he takes in two of those figures, the two angels, in his home in Sodom, protecting them from the crowd outside that wants to abuse and probably kill them. And then Rahab sheltering the Israelite spies who have come to spy out Jericho. So all three of these stories involve the main figures opening their homes, and in some way that hospitality is counted as obedience. And especially in the case of Lot and Rahab, the hospitality kind of saves their skin. With Abraham, it's a little bit more of, he's just being obedient and faithful to God. But in terms of Lot and Rahab, that hospitality really kind of bails them out. Rahab's hospitality kind of earns her a spot among God's people as sort of a faithful Gentile. So as a result of their hospitality, these figures are affirmed. Now, what I think prompted Adam's question is that these stories, with the exception of Rahab, with Abraham and Lot, those two stories aren't really mentioned. Clement talks about God's covenant with Abraham. He talks about Lot being faithful and showing hospitality just briefly, and then uses Lot's wife as a counterexample of kind of what not to do. So we kind of have to infer these things, that the connection to hospitality for Abraham and Lot is these two stories. But at the same time, showing hospitality to divine figures is a little bit of a trope in ancient literature. If you think about bits from the Odyssey, other ancient stories, hospitality is kind of a big deal. I don't want to delve too much into that connection, but in terms of Abraham and Lot, those stories are their connection to hospitality traditionally. So the point of mentioning that is it's part and parcel with the idea of these figures being examples of humble obedience. The hospitality is an expression of their humility, their faithfulness, and their obedience. Okay, second question. This is from Carol, my mom. She says, since you mentioned, I think, that Clement and John address some of the same topics, concerns in their writings, John's third epistle that you read and your preview of 1 Clement, remind me of where and what context John writes in. They are contemporaries. Clement is in Rome. Where is John? So trying to connect these two figures a little bit more. We'll talk a little bit more about some of this stuff on Sunday, but just to kind of run over a few things. So John supposedly served the churches in modern-day Turkey, and particularly he is associated with Ephesus. Irenaeus, in particular, who actually appeared in our list of kind of John's disciples, his sort of spiritual offspring, if you will. Irenaeus, in his Against Heresies, writes about John living and working in Ephesus. And specifically, he mentions that the church that Paul founded in Ephesus, so think Paul's epistle to the Ephesians, continued on with John until the reign of the Emperor Trajan. He mentions Trajan specifically. Trajan reigned from around 98 to 117 CE. So that just gives you kind of a time frame. If you think about John dying around 100 CE, that makes sense. So John kind of carries the church in Ephesus forward after they were founded by Paul. And this kind of comes into play because Clement is writing from Rome, and that community, that Christian community, was formed relatively late in Paul's ministry, as far as I know. And he's writing to Corinth, a community that was founded earlier in Paul's ministry. And so Clement doesn't have the he's writing to, a community that was founded by Paul, the famous Paul. Clement doesn't have the clout that John has. He doesn't have that sphere of influence in Corinth. And so he's kind of having to make up for it. And this is one of the things that we'll talk about. This shapes Clement's rhetoric, is this difference in their situations between he and John. Their pastoral situations shape the way in which they address their readers and their listeners. John is able to make rhetorical moves that Clement has to do a lot more work to make. John is able to speak as the aged father writing to his children. Clement is not able to quite do that. And so we're going to talk on Sunday about the ways in which Clement has to kind of go about persuading his readers. I have 35 seconds left. Yes. So in under 10 minutes, I have answered these two questions. Great questions. Some of these things we're going to go into a little bit more on Sunday, but I hope this is kind of helpful in terms of not only introducing some of the rhetorical things that Clement's going to do, but also a refresher maybe on John's situation. So, having said that, I'm going to stop there. We'll be back on Sunday, 3 p.m. We're going to talk about First Clement, talk about its rhetoric, its use of scripture, and all that good stuff. I'll see y'all then. Peace.